Is the RTX 4090 overrated? Is it actually worth the money? Some people definitely think it's overrated and too expensive, and other people think it's the only true 4K card out there. I did make a video recently talking about the 4080 and asking the question, is it really a true 4K card? If you're curious to know the answer to that question, be sure to check that video out right after this one. I had the Gigabyte Aero OC model of the 4080, and it served me well for the better part of about 5 or 6 months. However, I did recently decide to sell it, and I took that money and rolled it into a 4090. And this is the 4090 I decided to buy. Yes, it is the PNY model, and I know you're gonna have comments and questions about the PNY model. In fact, the day that I bought this, I posted it from the Micro Center parking lot, and a lot of people, actually most people, were pretty happy for me, and they said they were excited to see today's video, so here you go. But some of you had to make sure you told me that the 4090 was overrated, and if you're gonna buy a 4090, why did you buy the PNY model? I'm going to address all of that in today's video. Now, let me make this abundantly clear. If you have a 4080, yes, the 4090 is better, but it is not worth you selling your 4080 and buying a 4090. As a general consumer, I would never do that personally. I only did it from a content creation standpoint. You see, I've gotten multiple comments over the last several months where people have asked me to review a 4090 or benchmark a 4090, and obviously I can't do that without owning a 4090. It's not like Nvidia is gonna send me one. And then in addition to that, I've been fortunate enough recently to have a few sponsors come on the channel, get some ad revenue, and then equally important, I was able to open up a Patreon and actually have people sign up for it. And so if you're a Patreon member, you are making a big difference in the content that is getting published on this channel. Thank you so much. You truly matter, and I really appreciate your support. Thank you so much. Okay, so why did I buy the 4090 PNY model? Of all the 4090s out there, why did I buy the PNY? Well, to be honest with you, I walked into Micro Center looking to buy a 4090, obviously, and the PNY was available. It was one of the cheapest models available, and it was recommended to me very strongly by an employee at Micro Center. His name is EJ, and he's totally awesome, so thank you, EJ. I really do appreciate it. He had recently purchased the 4090 PNY model, and he swore by it, said it was great. He highly recommended it. Great thermals, great performance, great on the acoustics or, noise levels or whatever. And so I decided to take a gamble and take it home. After all, if I didn't like it, I could always return it. But you know what? The card has been phenomenal, and we're going to talk more about that starting right now. Some people will say it's ugly, but looks are subjective. I'll admit the card wasn't really my taste at first, but I vertically mounted it in my Lancool 3, and I covered up the red accents on the fans, and now the card looks great in my opinion. I love the way the X looks. I think it really pops and stands out in my case, and overall the design has really grown on me. And the back of the card, honestly, I think looks pretty standard when compared to all the other cards out there. It's not really bad, it's not really great, it's just a fairly standard looking backplate on a GPU. So overall, I thought it looked pretty good, and I had zero issues with it. I still have zero issues with it. So yeah, for whatever that's worth to you. Now, one of the key components about the PNY model is the fact that it only can draw 450 watts. And so because of that, a lot of people will refer to it as a gimped 4090. But in all honesty, I don't really view the 450 watt BIOS as a bad thing. I really don't. Because in my opinion, the less wattage I have to deal with, the better, because now that means I'm gonna have better thermals out of the box. That means I'm less likely to melt my adapter. A lot of people could care less about electricity costs, especially on higher end cards. I get it. But look, if you're in Europe, which a lot of my viewers are, you're fighting a lot of electricity costs right now. And so that is definitely a benefit of this card. I'm just saying, yes, you could buy a more expensive card that can pull in more wattage and then you could power limit it, absolutely. But why would you do that? If the main reason why you're buying it is because it has that extra power draw, why would you not use the extra power draw? But for me personally, I am totally fine that this card can only draw 450 watts, just me personally. The PNY model that I have is the XLR8, which I believe stands for Accelerate. That's the model of the PNY that I have. Yes, PNY does make another 4090 model that is not the XLR8, but in terms of the XLR8, everything I'm saying today pertains to that specific card. Now, another benefit about the PNY model or XLR8 model is that it is on the small smaller side of things in terms of 4090s. It's actually only a little bit bigger than the Founders Edition model. And so if you're looking for a 4090 and you need it to be on the smaller side, the PNY XLR8 model may have you covered. Now, I'm not saying it's a small card because 4090s are not small cards, but it is on the smaller side of things as far as 4090s go. In terms of noise and coil whine and all that, let me simplify. Number one, I don't have a decimal reader, so I can't tell you those numbers, but I can tell you that the fans do support a 0 RPM mode. So unless the card gets too hot, the fans are not going to turn on. I'm filming this video right now and the fans are currently not spinning. So yeah, for whatever that's worth. Now, when the fans do spin, let's talk about coil whine. This card does have intermittent coil whine. And so that means I will pop the card in and I will fire up a game, and sometimes I'll have almost no coil whine, and then the next time I'll fire up the exact same game, same settings, same everything, and now I have noticeable coil whine. It is very odd actually, but thanks to Optimum Tech's video about how to minimize coil whine, I was actually able to apply an undervolt as well as a frame rate limit, and yeah, the coil whine basically went away completely. And we're gonna talk about some of those results starting right now. So let me show you Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. I ran the in-game benchmark, and right now you're basically looking at native 4K on the balance preset with no limits at all. Now this is out of the box settings with the 4090 PNY XLR8 model. And as you can see, the temperature is hovering in the mid 50s. Closer to the end of the benchmark, we do get closer to 60C, but we never quite touch it. I think we peak around 58 to 59C. And the average power draw here is between 330 to 340 watts. Again, closer to the end of the benchmark, that temporarily spikes up, but it does come right back down. Now we're looking at the same benchmark for Modern Warfare 2 native 4K balance preset, and here I implemented a 950 millivolt limit for an undervolt. Now what this has done is allowed me to draw even less wattage, have the card run even colder, and help to minimize coil whine. And as you can see, our temperatures are noticeably lower. Now we're closer to that 50C, 51C marker, and our power draw is not even touching 300 watts, but yet the overall frame rate is still incredibly high. And now with the same benchmark, native 4K balance preset with a 950 millivolt limit plus a 120 FPS frame rate limit, we can see that our frame time graph is incredibly smooth, and our overall power draw is around 215, 220 watts, briefly peaking up to 230 watts and coming right back down. And our temperatures are mid 40s. We're looking at 45, 46C here, temporarily peaking up to 51C at times, but coming right back down. And so this card is running incredibly efficient here with these settings, and I have basically zero noticeable coil whine. And look, I get it. Why would I limit myself on frame rate? Why would I limit myself to 120 FPS? Well, my monitor is a 4K LG OLED TV, and it maxes out at 120 Hertz. So I can't really experience anything above 120 FPS anyway. And so if I want to minimize power draw, improve thermals, and have a rock solid frame time graph and basically no coil whine, this is honestly the best way of doing it. And so that's what I've decided to do here. But now what I want to do is take this 4090 and compare it to the 4080 that I sold. We're going to run all the same benchmarks more or less and do a head-to-head comparison and talk about the improvements that the 4090 has over the 4080. And then we're going to finish out the video by talking about, is the 4090 overrated? And now on the screen, you are looking at all the hardware used for today's benchmarks. The only difference between the 4080 benchmarks and the 4090 benchmarks is the GPU itself. Everything else is exactly the same. All the benchmark data here was recorded with OBS Studio. Yes, OBS Studio does negatively impact GPU gaming performance, but today's comparison is still valid and fair because I made sure to record both sets of data using OBS Studio, so the impact was evenly distributed across both GPUs. If you expect to buy one of these GPUs and if you plan to use them without OBS running in the background, your gaming performance will most likely be higher than what you are seeing today. And we're kicking things off with Assassin's Creed Valhalla, native 4K max settings with no power limit, no frame rate limit, no undervolt or anything like that, no DLSS or upscaling of any kind. And as you can see here, the average frame rate for the 4090 is around 114 FPS, whereas with the 4080, we're only around 91 to 92 FPS. And of course, both are increasing as the benchmark progresses, but the 4090 is noticeably faster than the 4080 here. The overall GPU temperatures are basically identical, and that's because the 4080s essentially have the 4090s coolers on them. The 4090 is drawing noticeably more wattage as well though. The 4080 4080 is barely even breaking 275 watts, whereas the 4090 is a fair decent amount over 300 watts here. GPU utilization is looking solid for both GPUs at around 99%. The 4080 does clock slightly higher than the 4090, but the 4090 is still faster overall. Next up, I have God of War 2018 native 4K on the Ultra Plus settings preset. No upscaling of any kind and no other limits are imposed here. As you can see, the 4090 is substantially faster than the 4080. The 4080 is struggling to hit 100 FPS. It is maintaining it, but it's right there on the limit, whereas the 4090 is averaging around 134 to 135 FPS. Now, the 4090 here is definitely pushing that power limit. Of course, we're well over 400 watts here, and the 4080 is also being pushed on this side because the 4080 is rated at 320 watts, and as you can see, we're definitely going a little bit over that here, and both cards are being pegged at around 99 to 100% GPU utilization, and the clock speed is actually closer here than it was previously in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. The 4080 is coming in a little bit cooler than the 4090, but that could also be attributed to the fact that it is drawing noticeably less wattage here. But overall, the 4090 is quite a bit faster here in this game. Both are very playable experiences with zero issues, but this is no competition at all. The 4090 is just way faster in God of War 2018. Okay, sadly, I'm having to switch up the benchmarks just a little bit here because the side-by-side footage was not looking clear enough, and I wanted to make this abundantly clear for the people watching. Right here, we have the RTX 4080 native 4K ultra settings with Halo Infinite. And as you can see, temperatures are around 60, 61, 62 C, and the overall average frame rate is about 123 FPS. And the overall power draw is just a little bit over 300 watts. And the GPU utilization is pretty solid at around 98%. Now, I wanted to show this to you before comparing it directly to the 4090. And so now I'm going to take a screenshot and put it up on the screen so we can do a comparison with the 4090. And so now looking at the RTX 4090 native 4K ultra settings with Halo Infinite, we can see that the 4090 is drawing slightly more wattage here, and that is leading to a slightly hotter GPU, but you're literally talking 1 or 2 C, not a big deal. The same 98 to 99% on the GPU utilization, but the overall average frame rate is an average of 160 FPS, and the 1% lows are 115 FPS versus the 4080's 95 FPS. Once again, we have a substantial performance increase when you compare these two cards. And now for our final game, we're going to be looking at Spider-Man Remastered, native 4K, very high preset, ray tracing reflections are set to very high, and geometry detail is also set to high. As you can see, our average frame rate is 86 FPS, the GPU utilization is bouncing around in the 90s, and the overall GPU temperature is around 58 to 60 C, which is just phenomenal. And the power draw peaks around 270 watts, which is not bad at all. And now when we use those exact same settings with the RTX 4090, we can see the average frame rate goes from 86 FPS up to about 96 to 97 FPS. And this is not the substantial performance leap that we were hoping for when compared to all the other games shown in today's benchmark data. But Spider-Man Remastered is a CPU intensive game, and the CPU here is exactly the same for both of the GPUs, which is the AMD Ryzen 7800X 3D. GPU temperature is about the same as the 4080. The GPU utilization is also about the same as the 4080, and the power draw is actually higher for the 4090, but the overall GPU temperatures are about the same, and that's only netting us about 10 to 12 FPS on average, which in all honesty is not that impressive for Spider-Man Remastered. Okay, so is the 4090 overrated? In my opinion, no, it's not, but you let me know in the comment section below what you think. I did an entire video called Before You Buy Any 40 Series GPU, and if you watch that video, then you can see how I show that the 4090 is literally the only 40 series card that did not get cut down in some kind of way when NVIDIA made the 40 series cards. Every other 40 series card, including the 4080, had at least one thing cut down, but the 4090 is the only card to actually see improvements across the board. And in addition to that, the 4090 is the only card in its pricing class, and it has no direct competition. Intel and AMD has no GPU that can compete with the 4090. They're not even trying to compete at that pricing point. And so now you have Nvidia left out there in the wild to do whatever they want completely unchecked. Now the 4090 is insanely expensive. I will agree on that, and I do wish it was a little bit cheaper, but that is the side effect of what happens when you have no direct competition. Now the 4090 is insanely fast. I think it's a great card. I'm happy to have it. However, if you're already in the 40 series family, don't sell your 40 series card just to go get a 4090. Yes, it is fast. It is noticeably faster than any other 40 series card, including the 4080 at 4K, but it is not worth you selling what you have already purchased just to upgrade and get the best. Just wait out for the 50 series or something like that. That would be my recommendation. But hey, I want to know your thoughts on all of this, because right now I'm incredibly exhausted. I'm getting cotton mouth from speaking so much. I've spent like 3 or 4 hours on this video. This is like my 3rd bottle of water. So help me out, okay? If you're new, get subscribed. If you like the video, hit the like button. It goes a long way in helping me out. And until next time, rock out.